Hey everybody, John Brown here again for a very special board game review. Why do I say so? Because I will be reviewing my favorite game, El Grande. Now, when I say my favorite game, that's different than maybe what I think is the greatest game. I mean, how you define the greatest game? I mean, you could say the most popular, you could say Monopoly's the greatest game, you could say most beloved, maybe Agricola, or A Twilight Struggle, or Puerto Rico. There's a lot of games that might be considered the greatest game of all time. And it's kind of considered the godfather of area control games, if you will, and some would argue there are games that have come out that do it even better since then. I remember hearing somebody saying that, well, if they're going to play area control, they'd rather play Tammany Hall. And I get it, there's a lot of other games out there, but I just have a lot of fun playing this game. There's a lot of interaction, which in board game terms often comes down to meanness. Not directly attacking, but in some cases pretty close to it. The way you move pieces out from even being available to be put onto the board, all kinds of different things. But I've just had a hoot playing this game. I started really getting into board gaming about 2.5, 3 years ago. I've played all the big games for the most part in that time, and some of the classics. And in my board gaming group, I've always had fun playing this. So why wait to review it now? Because I finally have my own copy of it, and I'm very excited. So this is the copy that has all the expansions in it. I haven't even looked at the expansions yet. But even though this is quite an older game, I'm still hoping for a reprint. And I figured, it's one of my favorites, so why not take a look at it? So let's take a quick look at how it's played, and then we'll get down to why it's my favorite game. Right here we have a setup for basically a 2-player game, and in general this game is best played with 4 or 5, but we'll get to that in final thoughts. We have a color cube on the starting track, we have some cubes out on the board on places that are drawn randomly from a deck of cards with auto locations, and the king marker out on the board in a random location. And then we have the Castile over here, which we'll get to in a second. We have the players, and we have their cards. These cards are numbered 1 through 13, and we'll see how they come into play in a second. We have a player's court and a player's provinces. Basically, these piles are separated. I'm going to have 7 to start the game right here, and then 2 out on the board, 1 with my Grande, the big piece there in the center. And each player has a setup like this with these 2 separate piles, and also this that we use to pick locations during the game. And then the green player has it set up the same way. So on a turn, we are going to be bidding for not necessarily turn order, well, yes, turn order, and also what we do on our turn. Each round, there's going to be a certain number, well, actually the same number of these available, and then the 4 of these actions will be different, and then there will always be a move the king action. So when we bid on our turn, we use these. Each player, starting in the first round in random turn order, and after that, the player who used the lowest number and went last in the last round will flip over one of these cards that they choose to bid. So if in the first round, as I knock everything over, if I choose a 5, no other player can choose a 5. If a player goes below that, they will pick those action tiles after me and go after me. If they choose above that, they will go before me. Now once that 5 is used, it stays out there, and then we can also keep track of who had the lowest number in the round to see who goes first next round. And let's say I had the lowest number. Well, next round I can put out another number. But the key thing is, unless you trigger a special power, these cards are gone from the game for good. We won't use all of them during the game. The game goes 9 rounds, we have 13 of them. But there's something else about these cards too. The lower numbers have a picture of more people on them, or in this game they're known as caballeros, that basically the number of people on this card is the number of people I take from my provinces and put into my court. What's the difference between these 2 piles? Well, these people in the court have the ability to go out onto the board, while these people are still in waiting, so they have to move over from here to here to be able to be used out onto the board. And well, how many can I put onto the board? That's where the caballeros and these cards come from. If I were to take this action, I can only move 1 caballero onto the board during my turn, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, after each person has gone through, whoever has the highest number will be the first one to pick one of these. In general, these where you only put 1 person on the board are going to have better abilities. For example, this one says move any 3 caballeros on the board. So once the board gets in a certain state, obviously moving any 3 can be pretty powerful. And then there's a lot of different abilities like this that will come out. Now this one is interesting here. The king returns. Your fellow players must each send 3 caballeros back to the provinces. They can take them from any regions and or their court. So every other player is going to have to take either from here and put them back here, or from the board and put them back to the area where they're not even available to be played until they go back into the court. So some of these can be, actually most of these can be really, really mean. There's one, in fact, that moves everybody from here to here. And we'll get to that card also in my final thoughts. But you can do special scoring, the ones that basically have 4 in the first number for scoring, so on and so forth, can score, and all different kinds of abilities. Now moving the king here is rather important, because unless you're using a special power, when you're just placing your caballeros on the board, they have to go somewhere adjacent to where the king is. And in general, you cannot place where the king is or remove where the king is. So we can place on the board anywhere around the king. So moving the king not only decides where we can go, but it decides where we cannot go, seeing as we can't go anywhere not adjacent to it or where the king is. And when we do a scoring, the king gives us 2 bonus points. So how do we do scoring? Well, we'll go 3 rounds, and then we'll do a scoring round. But before we get to the scoring round, we have to talk about the Castile. Why is that so important? Well, when we're placing people on the board, there's a couple of things to keep in mind. So if this was my number, maybe I'd move 5 people from my court to my province, or from my provinces to my court. Maybe I would take this tile and be able to place 3 people. Well, on my turn, I can decide whether or not I want to do that action, and I place these people 3 out onto the board. And I can decide what order I want to do that in. So for example, I could take these 3 and I could put them in places where there are 4 markers, like so, and then score. Or I could score the 4 markers and then place. You can do your ability before or after you place, but that's important to keep in mind. But also on your turn, you can put people into the Castile. Now you have to announce how many people you're putting in there, but after to put in there, it's pretty easy for players to forget exactly how many from each color are in there. Why is that important? Well, when we score, the very first thing we do is score the Castile. We lift this up, and we see how many are in there for each. And whenever we do scoring, whether it's in a province or here, the number 1 player who has the most cubes there gets this many points, number 2 and 3. And less players you use, for less player games, you use less of them. The 2-player game, you only use the first one. In the 3-player game, you use the first 2. If there's a tie, everyone gets the next lowest number. So if there was a tie for first place, both players would get this. And then if there's a tie for second place, then nobody would score any points because we move from this one back down and there's nothing there. So that's how we do scoring and ties. Now, the other interesting thing though is on the scoring track we see there's this symbol of a dial. Before we score the Castile, we determine a place on here and we put it face down where we want our cubes from the Castile to go out onto the board. And that will change how the scoring is going to happen. So we decide where we want our caballeros to go. We score the Castile, then we take everyone from the Castile and put them out onto the board, which can affect scoring. You can only put them in one location, but there's a good deal of guessing, well, I'm going to go here because that seems the most powerful, but my opponent knows I'm going to go there, and he put cubes in there too, so maybe he'll go there, so maybe I'll go somewhere else and try to surprise him. So lots of, intrigue about what you should do about that. And after every 3 rounds, we're going to score. There's a total of 9 rounds and 3 scoring. Why do I love El Grande? Well, the first time I played it, I really enjoyed it. And I remember specifically the second time I played it, I played that card that lets you choose to move everyone else's caballeros back from their court to their provinces. I'd been building up a bunch. That had been my strategy, to build up a bunch early in my court. Then I sent everyone's back, which puts me in a huge advantageous position. And then for the rest of the game, everyone attacked me. Now I should note there are 2 veto cards in those decks that change every round, so you don't know what order they're going to come out in. And if you take a veto, you can stop someone's action that turn, or in the next turn, then it goes away. But no one had the veto, no one could stop it, and, well, after I'd been picked on all game, and I felt a second, someone else was starting to take a clear lead, I still got picked on, because I had made that horrible move and everyone was angry. And I remember that, and I remember it being really fun. I'll play anything, a type of gamer that I don't mind to take that thing. I don't mind that in games. And even though that it was kind of frustrating, it's like, well, why don't you go after guide and lead? And there can be leader bashing in this game, and that can be part of the strategy. But that some people, if you don't like mean games, you're not going to like this game. But that sort of interaction, every turn deciding what action is the best, what you should bid on, you have your highest number, even if it's not 13, but your highest one left, and someone else uses that exact number, and now you can't use it. There's a lot of intricate decisions that go into really what's a pretty simple game. And to me, I find all those decisions really fun. Where to move people, how many to place in the Castile, where to move them at the end of the round. And I've always had a lot of fun with this game. There are definitely some negatives about this game. The score track's pretty stupid. If you looked at it in the bottom corner, the map kind of folds up. So we kind of joke that your goal is to get as close to the end as possible without falling off. And usually the winning score just usually a little bit wraps around the board. So it's just kind of weird how it's set up like that. But, and this game is not really recommended. It's not recommended at all really for 2 players. It's not nearly as good with 3 players either. This game is basically best with 4 or 5 players, especially with 5 players. There's a lot of competition over those actions and a lot of interaction. So, and really the art style is, it's old. I mean, it doesn't pop, it's not like, Francis Drake was the first review I did, and, you look at that board and everything, the color scheme and how it pops, this is designed to look like an old map, and it's not the prettiest game. And, like I said, they're definitely negative, so if it's not great with lesser number, it's not the prettiest, it's not the most complicated, but it's the game I just have so much fun with. It always feels like we come away with stories, there's a lot of competition, and every little move, what action to take. I can move 3 cubes, do I want to move mine, do I move somebody else's, when do I move to king, when's the scoring round coming up. This is one of these games that has such simple mechanisms, but they come together to give you great decisions every round, and that's why I love it so much. Rado probably would not enjoy this game. There's a lot of interaction, or as he rightly says in board games, pretty much attacking. But if you do enjoy that sort of interaction, if you want to call it that, and you think it's fun, and it's something you enjoy, then I just love this game. I hope it gets reprinted, and I've just had a blast every time I've played it. And I'm really excited to have my own copy now. And that's a look at the game I've enjoyed the most. Not necessarily the greatest game of all time, but a game I just have fun playing. And in the end, isn't that all that really matters? So if you're checking me out on Board Game Geek, be sure to check out my YouTube channel, Stormageddon42. I'm up to 10 subscribers, and hoping to keep that growing. I know most people watch these on the Geek, so if you want to check me out there and subscribe and see what stuff comes out. If you want to leave suggestions, what you want to see. And keep on gaming, and hope you guys have as much fun with it as I do. Alright, thanks a lot. Talk to you later. Bye.